Back in the day, people didn't worry about locking their doors before they went to bed at night. But we do now because we know the world's not as safe as it used to be. Are you thinking the same way about your data and your security that way? Let's talk about that. Welcome to another issue of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I am your host, Catryn Becker. And in this show, we talk to all sorts of interesting people because there's so much out there that we can learn and grow from. Because while a smart person learns from their mistakes, a genius learns from the mistakes of others. So let's talk to these successful geniuses and figure out what they've learned so that we can either avoid the mistakes completely or we can learn to fail faster. Today's episode is going to be super interesting because it's about cybersecurity. And while a lot of people think like, oh, I don't understand it, we are going to break this down for you so that it's super easy to understand, just like you know that you need to have a deadbolt on your home lock or that you wouldn't put your money in a bank without security. So we're going to talk all things security. And with me today, we have the founder and CEO of Innovative Technologies. His name is Paul Tracey, and he is an expert in all things IT and cybersecurity. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
I'm excited to be here too, because I think this is such a relevant topic. A couple of episodes ago, I think it was episode 92, I had Regina Spencer on the show, and she is in healthcare and was talking about the data breach that happened with the healthcare system and how it super duper affected her and her company. And she thought she was safe. And so I'm really glad to have you here to have your viewpoint of what kind of clients you work with, how you work with them. How do we think we're safe? Are we actually safe? And what we can do about it. So tell us a little bit about Innovative Technologies before we get into all the juicy good bits.
So we've been in business for a little bit over a decade, and really the reason why I started the business is because I was in enterprise IT, helping large companies with a lot of resources to dedicate towards security that were, let's just say, mismanaging those resources. And it's funny that you mentioned the healthcare breach because those jobs were in healthcare and specifically for those reasons, right? It's they had the resources, didn't allocate them properly, and then bad things happen. And then so my thought was, well, what's happening to small and medium-sized businesses that don't necessarily have these internal teams, the resources to dedicate towards cybersecurity. And so I went out and started asking, and that's what happens when you ask stuff, you get answers. And the answer was, we're not.
Wow.
Right. And then so pre-pandemic through the pandemic up until now, we've seen a drastic increase in these cyber events and systems being shut down and data and cash stolen. And when we watch the news, right, it's Colonial Pipeline, it's Target, and we think it's these big companies. But it's not. Small businesses are the #1 target because hackers may be criminals, but they're not stupid. And they discovered the same thing that I discovered.
Rarely are stupid.
So they discovered the same thing that we discovered, which is small businesses don't have protection. And so it's much easier to get in. They might get less money, but they're going to get more incidents, right? It's almost the Walmart approach.
Right.
To those things is
quantity.
We'll get less money, but we're going to get it a lot of times over and over again. And so that's what we're really there for. I didn't realize when I started a business in cybersecurity and IT managed services that I was signing up for a job in education. But quickly found out that was the case, right? And so that's why I love to do podcasts like this and help people understand what their actual risk is.
Well, and it's one of those things like, you buy, I don't know, McAfee or whatever it is off the shelf, Norton, and you think you're completely safe. So I think that's one piece of it is you're like, well, I bought this thing, so I'm obvious that must be enough. The second thing is probably like, well, who would target me? How would they even know me? I'm so small. And then I think the third thing working against it is due to, pop culture, media, film, we have this image that a hacker is this kid in a hoodie in the dark, furiously tapping on their keyboard. And from kind of our pre-conversation, these hackers are their businesses within themselves. They're very sophisticated and organized. it is not always these like lone wolf kind of attacks. Tell us a little bit more about the reality of the hackers and what that looks like.
Yeah, and so I think that's, in terms of educating small and medium-sized businesses to the threat, that's part of the issue is the media does a very, very bad job of portraying who's actually committing these crimes, right? Um, Turns out it's not a kid usually in his basement with a hoodie. It's a large, well-backed, cash flush corporate entity. Uh, these groups structure themselves the same as you or I would when we start a C Corp and we get a board of directors and we have all the layers and departments. It's exactly the same structure um, that they're working with. And it's very compartmentalized as well,
Mm.
right? So they have different departments that don't necessarily interact with each other to the point where if one of these entities attacks you and they successfully get in, they have customer service lines that you can call to help get the Bitcoin to pay them if you don't know how to do so.
Wow.
Right. And so it's not a kid,
Wow.
it's not a kid in his basement that has a staff in a call center to help you get the Bitcoin to pay the hackers, right?
Jeez, yeah, that's that's such a mental image. Like I also think of like a ransom note with like all the different letters cut out and pasted, that we see and being like, for help, call. And
I
actually
mean,
the person there to help you pay your ransom.
it makes great cinema, right? And that image is really good. It's a scary image of a guy and he's on his computer and doing his thing. They're not going to show you that, these are businesses, people in cubicles with suits and ties. And they've evolved to the place now where the groups have actually started making their bad stuff available to other people, right? So the same way that you buy a Microsoft license for your business products, right? Microsoft 365, your Outlook, someone can actually go and purchase the ransomware, the malware, the thing that infects your system from these companies for a monthly charge. And then they will support them in fulfilling and also the payment, right? So the structure is the same as a corporate entity. The departments are the same. The function is the same to get money. They're just doing it illegally, right?
So
They
is
don't.
this something that like functions on the dark web, which I don't really even understand what that is, to be completely fair. I just know the term. So if I'm saying things that are just like completely ignorant, please forgive me and educate me.
No, so the dark web is the marketplace for these criminals,
Okay.
right? It's basically the internet, but they don't have names that people can remember,
Mm.
right? So you're not going to walmart.com or you're not going to google.com. There's these very long, complex names, and you go through a series of steps to get there and get a listing directory. And then you can go to those sites that are on the dark web. They're just not published, so they don't show up in search engines and those kind of things, right?
They eschew SEO.
They're definitely not interested in having search engines pick them up,
They're
right?
like the opposite of SEO.
Total opposite of that. And so when you go onto this marketplace, it's pretty much the same as any e-commerce site that you go to, right? Walmart, Amazon, all of those. And you can purchase people's records, their driver's license numbers, social security numbers, credit card numbers, um, very cheap. And so the criminals are stealing that data and then turning around and selling it. And so you say, well, why is this worth it? They have these big corporations doing this. One medical record is worth $1,200
Wow.
on the dark web for them to sell. So if they get into a system that has the medical records of 5,000 people, it's quick math, right?
Yeah.
$1,200 a piece. That's why they do it.
Mm.
It's financially backed. There's no question about that.
Well,
Um,
and I got to imagine in like today's day and age, everything is so connected. Like if I make some change on my desktop in a login or something, like it immediately shows up on my phone. And so we think of, taking that to the businesses, how all of our systems are connected, whether it's to your customers, from your vendors, like everyone's sharing financial information, personal information, going back and forth. So is there a danger that even if you as an entity think you're safe, but the people upstream or downstream of you haven't done their due diligence, that there's still a vulnerability there?
1000% yes. Um, and we see this time and time again. So Target was hacked a few years ago.
Mhm.
Um, that didn't actually happen from anything on Target systems. Their HVAC vendor came in, had to do a service. He plugged his laptop, which was infected, into their network, and boom, down goes Target.
Bob's your uncle.
Right. So when it comes to regulatory compliance, things like HIPAA have agreements in place for the vendors. And we're seeing this more and more on a state by state level, where they're adding these regulations where the vendors that you deal with, particularly in government, CMMC and so forth, requirements are that you are getting notification from your vendors that they are following the proper cybersecurity protocols.
Mm.
Because what we see, particularly in healthcare, is the supply chain issue. So one of these big healthcare places gets hit, and all of the other businesses that are associated can't function now.
Mm.
Right. And so, again, hackers are pretty smart. And so when they get into a system, the average is they're there for 260 days before they do anything.
Oh, wow.
And the reason why they're doing that is because they want to know who you're connected to.
So are they just like passively collecting data during that time?
They are, so what they do is they'll get into a network and they don't know where they landed, what machine they're on, right? So usually at night, typically, they'll run scans that only last a minute, maybe 30 seconds.
Mm.
And so they're very hard to detect. And
Yeah.
what they're doing is just gathering information,
Mm.
right? Because for them to be successful, if you have legitimate backups, all your systems are backed up, and they can't get in the backups, well, you'll just back up your systems from your backup and then forget that they did what they did and fix how they got in, obviously. But if they hang around, generally people back up servers once a month. So they got to stay at least a month so they can see that network traffic going to the backup server. Now they've identified where the backup server is.
Mm.
They'll fight their way in. Once they have their way into the backup, they will encrypt everything so you can't get it. You can't restore from backup. And that forces you, in their mind, to pay them the money.
So let's go back to that HVAC technician. And you
Okay.
said his laptop was infected.
Mm-hmm.
So is this a virus? Is this malware? Is this ransomware? Can you help kind of the layperson understand what these different terms mean and how they impact them?
Right. So we've evolved quite a bit in the technical terminology for these attacks, right? They generally have pretty much the same purpose, right? So when we look at a virus, the real definition there is a virus wants to spread. That's its main goal, right? So there are infections we name viruses, and their main objective is to spread to all the machines in the network, right? When we discuss things that are considered malware, they may not be encrypting drives and doing those things, but they're doing other malicious things on the network beyond just spreading themselves, right? So maybe they're trying to break passwords, or they're trying to break into your routers or your Wi-Fi, or potentially your Internet of Things devices, cameras and so forth, that are usually pretty easy to get into.
Mm.
Unfortunately, that's the case. Um, and then when we talk about ransomware, we're talking about an infection that encrypts your files so that you cannot access any of them. And then that's generally followed by a message from the attacker that says you will pay us X amount of dollars, or you won't get your data back.
Hmm.
And
It's so crazy. And, we think of it in terms of getting our personal data stolen or our financial information. But one of my mentors had his Facebook hacked. And um, this person, whoever it was that took over his Facebook, was now posting about Bitcoin scams and real estate deals and, preying on the like, know, and trust that my mentor had built with his community, that people thought, oh, well, if he's doing it, it must be a good deal. And so I think that's almost even, I don't know, it almost feels worse that like some action I took or didn't take could impact my friends and family in a negative way and have caused them to lose money. And it was a pain in the butt to get his account back. He finally did, which most people never get their Facebook accounts back.
Facebook is, dare I say, lacking in the ability to care about assisting people with those issues.
Mm.
Um, it's something that we hear about. Generally, when we hear about it, it's because something had more severe has quickly happened from that. So when somebody gets into a social media account, if you're a business person or an entrepreneur, that's probably not their end game, right? But what they're getting access to is all of your connections. They're collecting data. That's how. So when we look at the stages that they go through in these attacks, there's always a collection of data. They're going to go to your social media, to your LinkedIn profile, and they're going to scrape all that information, find out as much as they possibly can, and then try to exploit that information in terms of passwords, in terms of communication with your contacts. If they do take over a Facebook account, right, they
Yeah.
can send messages to all your friends. And I've recently had this happen. That a friend of mine, same thing, his crypto posts that aren't him because his Facebook got taken over. He's reported it to Facebook. We've reported it to Facebook for him. I don't know, at least 15 times now,
Mm.
and they've done nothing. Right. So
Mm.
there's certainly an issue there that needs to be addressed, but it's those accounts we don't necessarily think, "Oh, I need two-factor authentication so I get a code and no one can log into my Facebook," right?
Right.
We think about that more in terms of financial accounts. But what we know from doing penetration testing, where we go in and basically pretend to be hackers so that we can show a business um, what data could be gotten and how quickly it could be exfiltrated from their network,
Hmm.
is that we're pulling tons of passwords, right, when we do those reports. Um, and so it's not just your business stuff. You're logging into your Facebook, you're logging into these other things. And then the secondary thing that we find is generally the reuse of passwords, right? Like, so
Mm.
somebody gets a password they like, it's a long one, right? So they're like,
Yeah.
well, it's good, it's long, I've got special characters, I'm doing all the check
All the
marks
things.
that all the things that we've been told that we need to do, except I'm using that on 10 or 12 different websites,
Yeah.
right? And so once they get it, and eventually they probably will get it if they have access to the system, now they're in 10,
Mm.
right? And so your Facebook password, okay, you lose your Facebook, it's a big pain in the rear end. If you reuse that password on your bank account, now we have a completely different situation.
It got a lot more painful.
A lot more painful real quick.
Yeah. It's amazing how that stuff escalates. So with AI is advancing so rapidly, and there's so many different things now that are connected with AI, that are enhanced by AI. Are you seeing that impacting cybersecurity as well?
Absolutely. And we have a tendency as a society with technology to run in guns blazing when we think something is great,
No,
right? This is
not
cool.
us.
and let's adopt it, and we're all going to use it, and it will be great. Um, if you pay attention, there's a lot of people warning about the threats to the degree that Microsoft just pulled, or the government, federal government just pulled Microsoft Copilot out.
Mm,
They're no longer allowed to use it, right?
really?
Because, right. So as OpenAI develops and all these other AI companies develop, what we know from being in security is people that program are amazing and they do great things, but generally security is not their focus.
Right, right.
And so as these systems come out, now we see certified ethical hackers, people like the people on my security team that go through and say, where can we exploit this? Right. And there's a lot there that's easily exploitable, that's usable. In certain cases, there's AI that's taking screenshots every 5 seconds. And so,
Wow.
right. And they're doing that to feed the AI so it can come up with the product that you want to use at the end, right? Whether it's editing videos or note taking, whatever it is. But if that gets compromised and you were in a, let's say, a Zoom meeting and there was confidential information, that's a big problem,
Right.
right? And how much of our business data, which is really the lifeblood of our business, right? I mean, anybody who started and run a business knows your list of customers and clients is the lifeblood of your business. That prospecting list that you have in your CRM. Like
Yeah.
if your CR and you lose all that data, it's nightmare,
Game
right?
over.
Game over. Because how do you don't rebuild that in a day or two? You didn't spend a day or two building it.
No, 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 no.
And so what data do we give AI access to is a big question that we're going to have to answer. And hopefully we get there before the implementation and the problems escalate to the level that they could.
Yeah, I mean, just the other day, my 12-year-old son came up to me and he knows that I use ChatGPT for business. It's been really helpful to automate a lot of different processes, save a lot of time. And he's like, Elon Musk said, stop using ChatGPT and he's gonna get rid of all of his Apple devices and all of this stuff. I mean, are those things that we should, as consumers, as business owners, be taking heed to?
I would say for the most part, the business owners that I talk to are using Chat GPT currently for marketing purposes,
Mhm.
right? Coming up with copy, so forth, rewriting things that they have internally, trainings and whatnot. It's really not that scares me so much. It's when we start allocating business responsibility with sensitive data to AI and allowing it to take actions that we would generally have a human take,
Mm,
that where that data needs to be protected, right?
got it.
And the idea, so the Elon thing with Apple um, is they're saying, like Facebook, I'm sure you see on Facebook now, you've got that little circle up in the top instead of
Yep.
search. And it's like,
Yep.
I didn't ask for that, but thank you. Kind of.
Thanks, no thanks.
Right. When applications start inherently having AI integrated into them, a compromise of that AI and its ability to do malicious things is exponential. And
Mm,
I think that is I'm not him and I haven't spoken to him about it, but I think that's the concern that Elon has, is that when we start inherently making these part of operating systems and part of the systems in general, without the testing required to understand those security concerns, we're making a huge mistake.
mm. So you mentioned certified ethical hackers. What is that? And how does that work? And I have so many questions.
So, certified ethical hacker is really a certification that you can get. It's a title, and what that means is you really enjoy breaking into systems, but you're not a criminal. And so you do that for the good folks who are trying to protect themselves so that you can show where their vulnerabilities are. And so on our security team, we have several folks with that title, and their specific job is when we go into a new business or someone's had an event is what can you break? They're
Mhm.
basically using all the tools that the hackers are using for the most part. And so they get to fulfill that scratch in the brain, you will, as I like to call it, because I'm a little bit that way myself, right?
Yeah.
Um, there is some pride and some enjoyment when you find a vulnerability in a system and you're like, "Ha, I got in." So
Gotcha.
I certainly can understand that. But those folks are vital in that without them, we're not even close to keeping up with the criminal element of it,
Sure.
right? We need to have those teams. We call them white hat hackers, basically. Difference between white and black hat is
Yeah.
good and bad, really. Um,
They wear white hoodies.
they wear white hoodies if you want to go back to that wonderful analogy, right? Um, but it's a part that's absolutely required. And the way to look at that is, well, what kind of service would that be, right? And so folks that are finally understanding that they need cyber insurance are finding out that these type of tests on their network are required for their insurance to pay out.
Mm.
Right. So when you sign an insurance policy, I'm sure we read every line, all of us, right? And we
Yeah, I've
understand all the
never
terms.
signed anything without reading it.
And the agent was amazing and they explained every last detail, right? But at the end of the day, when you buy cyber insurance, there are a bunch of things that you're stipulating to that you're doing to secure your data. In the event that something happens, when the insurance company sends a forensic team, if you're not doing those things or you have not had this testing done as required, they don't pay your policy.
Wow.
And so that's obviously a huge problem because recovering from these events can be tremendously expensive depending on the severity of the event, right?
Sure.
Um, and so usually it's annually depending on the insurance policy, but having what we call a penetration test done or risk analysis is having those certified ethical hackers go into the system, not with permission, not with passwords. Can you get in? And when you get in, what can you get? And what that's able to do is give the company a real risk assessment right now. If this happened right this moment, and when we run that test, it's usually under 10 minutes,
Wow.
right? That the actual function happens. It takes us a few days, obviously, to analyze the data, but the actual hacking happens in under 15 minutes,
That's
right?
so wild.
It's probably the worst part about being in this business, right? Is that people don't see the bad and the ugly coming
Mm.
because we have this false sense of security. It's not going to happen to me, uh, or even thinking I've invested in malware, right? I have Norton on my machines or McAfee or whatever antivirus that you happen to have. Um, but then when you come in and you can't access any of the computers and you can't get in your bank accounts and you literally have no plan for what to do, it's soul crushing. There's no other way around it. And unfortunately, in this business, I have to meet with people who are in that position
Mm.
on a regular basis. And
Yeah.
just like the rest of us, they work extremely hard. They built their business. They care about their teams. They care about their business community, right? And they put all this sweat equity into building this. And in moments, it can be gone.
And you're completely powerless.
I mean, the choice is pay the ransom and hope they give you your data back because that's the other thing, right? When you pay them the money, they're criminals.
Right. Why would they keep their word?
What's to stop them from saying, you know what, we changed our mind. We need another 50K.
Yeah.
We need another 100K, right? And
Whew,
after they give you your data back, if you haven't fixed the issue, what do you think the chance is that they're going to try to do that to you again next week?
pretty dang high. Well, before we end, can you share like one story of a customer or a client that you've helped and kind of give us the picture of, you know, what either was avoided or what were you able to recover for them, whatever that story may be.
Certainly, there's quite a few of those which I take pride in because that's what we're here for. We're in the service business, right? Trying to help people. So pre-pandemic, we started working with a company that's a residential treatment center, right? They have a on-site school and psychiatric care for teenagers like 13 through 18, right?
Okay.
And so we were called in to do an audit of their security. There wasn't any. They had one internal IT person, and they were like, no, we're compliant, we're secure, we're everything. Not the case, right? So we started working with them 2019, getting all their infrastructure, all their security in place, all the actual IT stuff that they needed to function properly. And then the pandemic hits.
Hmm.
And all of a sudden, everybody has to go remote, right?
Yeah.
And so making that transition, as we all made, if we're in business, right? We dealt with some serious stuff in trying to figure that out, right? Uh, Particularly in schools, getting hacked left and right. Teachers didn't have resources, so they're going online to get them.
Hmm.
Again, hackers are not stupid people. And so they started putting up lesson plans and so forth with viruses in them. And then you get kids with the porn pop-ups and all kinds of other terrible things. But because we had started working with them and building that infrastructure prior, that transition was almost seamless,
Wow.
right? They were able to provide services with no lack in psychiatric care, no lack in the school process and serving those needs as well, and reached HIPAA compliance at the same time.
Mm. That's really great because not that there's, one healthcare better than others, but, of course, as a mom of two kids, like being able to make sure those kids got what they needed during such a difficult time that we all know was very hard on children is really quite a heartwarming story and testimonial. So thank you very much for sharing that. So you are located in New York. Can you work with people all over?
Absolutely. So we have clients across the US, a few on the West Coast, which we're happy to adjust our time schedule for. There's always that East Coast, West Coast difference, but yes, we can certainly help anyone in the US.
What is kind of the person listening to say like, hey, I'm the one who needs to reach out to Paul? Kind of what are some of the characteristics of your ideal clients?
So we deal with small and medium sized businesses for any managed IT support at all. Where we really specialize is in cybersecurity and regulatory compliance. So that kind of leads us into the healthcare field and government as well. But we certainly do not exclude any business that needs help protecting themselves. That's exactly what we're here for.
And how can they get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to reach out?
So there's the business website, upstatetechsupport.com. There's LinkedIn, which I am always on LinkedIn. It's really me. It's not an automated thing. Like if you send me a DM, that goes to me. It's not AI. Just to be clear on that.
That's a fair clarification.
And on there's booking links. So try to be everywhere that I can and make our services available. So I would say those are probably the two best places to look us up.
Awesome, Paul. Well, thank you so much for being a guest and helping to break down, kind of the cybersecurity landscape as it exists today and kind of where are some of the vulnerabilities and places for people and business owners to be aware of. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome. And thank you for bringing it to your audience, right? you do a great service by bringing people the bad and the ugly. They don't always want to hear what those things are, but as business owners, what we don't know is a big problem, right?
Absolutely.
And dealing with the bad, I always want to be told the bad. It's the first thing on my list I want to correct, right? So appreciate that
Well,
you're doing that.
particularly in your business, that makes so much sense. Like, let's go straight for that first. Well, to the listeners, thank you so much for being here. I know you gleaned some valuable information, as have I. Kind of opens my eyes a little bit. And I know I was thinking in the back of my head, like, oh my gosh, am I secure enough? Like, do I need to get checked out? So if you've had those thoughts, please reach out to Paul. You've seen what a great human being he is, and you know that he's going to take really good care of you. Make sure to like this episode, share it with someone else who can find value in it, and subscribe so that you don't miss any future episodes. Until next time, take care.